Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and also the great radio station 92.1, that's WFOV, and we are very glad that they are with us here in our partnership at allpointstv.com, and we are certainly excited about the things that they're doing over there. Hopefully we are adding in to it and doing our part. I am very glad to be back again on Monday at 2 o'clock. We're back on schedule this week after having taped the show last Wednesday. We tape here at the studio. We invite you to come in at your leisure. And we're here from 2 o'clock to 3, and the other programs that we're doing here as well. Our program airs again at 12 o'clock on the radio station WFOV, and we come on there at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. We're preceded by another program that's one of my favorite programs on the air, and that is Whose Opinion Is It Anyway? And that's a program that is in fact done so well by Candace and by Victor Johnson, one of my very good friends. So you are in good hands, and we are glad that you're tuning us in, and we are honored by your presence. Today we want to talk about a number of issues, some of it national, and then some of it having to do with some local things as well. But one of the things I want to start out with has to do with a video I just saw put out by Tommy Sotomayor, who is a YouTuber, and I like him already because he is a YouTuber who speaks to a lot of conservative issues. And I'm a black conservative, and I don't mind people knowing that. I think that the liberal voice in our community is part of the problem in our community. And I wrote about that on Facebook, and that's what got me thrown off of Facebook. They're throwing conservatives off, particularly black conservatives. And I was thrown off because I wrote a 3-part series on Facebook, and I said that the major problem that is facing black America is not racism. Racism is black people's excuse.
I have a question for you. Okay, you're older than I am. You're around when, let's face it, I readily admit, the blacks probably were shut out from the political arena for generations.
Yeah, by the Democratic Party.
But I was like, even back then, I can understand the need for a lockstep mentality when you're fighting to get one particular goal in mind. But was it always, I don't, in the black community or whatever amongst blacks, because I knew a few of them, but I didn't, let's face it, people have a public self and a private self. Was there always kind of a consistent belief system amongst all blacks, or was it more consistent at least? Because I think it's really ironic that the liberals say they want people to fight for equal rights, but I would see that means a person would be able to have an individual viewpoint. They have a tendency to think that everybody now from that group has got to have the same belief system, the same beliefs, almost like carbon copy each other. And I think that's ironic when they fall for. I always see everything as individual rights rather. And if that was enshrined and actually followed through on, we wouldn't have needed the civil rights movement. So I was wondering though, was there always more of a consistent viewpoint, and they were supposed to be just carried on to in the future that nobody was supposed to have any variances?
The liberal position is more intolerant than the conservative position, and that is true on all cylinders, and it's certainly true in the black community. This intolerance of a position that is different from the position that a majority of blacks have is is somewhat of a recent phenomenon, and you can go back and trace it to when blacks were more liberal than they were conservative in their political approach. Now, when they were conservative, you didn't really have to organize against any of the black tenants in the black community, particularly in the South, because who was on the Democratic Party's side, if they were the ones discriminating against blacks in the South? How many blacks did you have to do a whipping, put on the political whipping post to get them to stop supporting Democrats, when Democrats were George Wallace, Ross Barnett, Governor Faubus, Jim Clark in Selma, and a whole lot of other segregationists, and the party of the Ku Klux Klan, which is the Democratic Party. How many blacks were you going to see over there supporting Democrats? Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King's father, these persons were registered Republicans. It doesn't mean that they voted Republicans in all elections, but they were registered Republicans that at some point would have a reason to vote for someone who was not Republican. And you go back to 1960, for example, when they had Dr. Martin Luther King in jail. They had him in jail in Albany, Georgia. And in fact, this was Reeves, Georgia. Albany, Georgia was another event where the civil rights movement was really defeated because they had Lori Pritchett in there who killed the civil rights movement pretty much killing it with kindness. They didn't give King the kind of episode he needs to put on TV so they could build political sympathy for the movement, and they would come in and join with King because people would be having dogs put on them, as in Birmingham and things like that. So it didn't happen in Albany. Laura Pritchett had studied the civil rights movement, and he understood the way you defeat King was, pretty much pat him on the head, put him in the paddy wagon, put him in jail, and almost hug him on the way downtown to the jail cell. But he was in Reeves, Georgia, in 1960, and nobody knew where King was. And in the two political parties, both the Republican Party, Richard Nixon being the candidate in the Republican Party and John F. Kennedy being the candidate in the Democratic Party, they were in there discussing in both parties what should they do with Dr. King being in jail in the deep part of the South, in this case Reedsville, Georgia, and what should they do to reach out to King so as to galvanize the black vote behind one of the two candidates. And while they were discussing it, how to approach it delicately in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party took the bull by the horn, got out there before the Republicans could, and had John F. Kennedy call Coretta Scott King, you probably remember the story, called Coretta Scott King up and told her they were looking into it, they were concerned about her husband, and they were going to do everything they could to make sure the husband was in fact treated well and would try to effect his release. They would talk to the governor and so on. Daddy King then said that he was so, now don't forget he's Republican, he was so taken by the phone call by John F. Kennedy, he said, I'm going to bail up some votes and put them in a suitcase, and I'm going to tote them over there to the Democratic Party. And as a result of that, 80% of blacks in 1960 voted for John F. Kennedy. And that vote, through in a very close election, there was only 100,000 votes difference between the John F. Kennedy's vote and Richard Nixon's vote, and John F. Kennedy got through by the skin of his teeth, as they say. And much of that was because of the fact that black people who had been voting, trickling of blacks were voting now for Democrats because of Roosevelt, but it had not become a tidal wave. But in 1960, 80% of blacks voted for the Democratic Party because of that one event. And then there's a continuation of that to the point right now where we see that blacks are kind of locked into the Democratic Party without knowing all the background and the history of it. But this intolerance that you're talking about, John, that intolerance is a new phenomenon in the black community because we've lost sight of what the Democratic Party stands for. And of course, the people that are inside the Democratic Party, all these standard bearers, all these office holders do not want to have clarity because they have positions inside of the Democratic Party. They're what Thomas Sowell is talking about in terms of barbarians inside the gates, not barbarians outside the gates, but the barbarians are inside the gates. And when I say barbarians, I'm not talking in this particular case of those that are barbarians in terms of the people with the clubs and all that. I'm talking about these barbarians in these two political parties. And I'm not making a case for either one of them, but I'm talking here about analyzing how we have this intolerance. And it comes because of liberalism. I wrote a 3-part article on Facebook, and when Facebook censors started to take note of what I was writing, because I think they were already aware of my presence because I had been censored once before, without using any profanity in my posts, which I don't use that. It wasn't anything to do with any obscenities that I was writing, and if those kinds of expletives deleted, they were not in my posts, and that was not why they censored me. They censored me because I was bringing a conservative point of view, and they were aware that I was one of those that I would call one of the awakened, and I'm not on anybody's plantation. I'm certainly not on a Democratic Party plantation, and I don't cater to the party of the Ku Klux Klan, which is what the Democratic Party stands for. I'm aware of that. And this idea that all of the segregations back in the time period switched their party alliance and now they're in the Republican Party, you can run that by somebody else that does not know the history. But I know the history, and I know that's not true.
But the only person I know that they can actually decidedly point to the Klan and being a Republican is David Duke. I mean, you might have Republicans who might be racist. You also have Democrats. I'd say a larger portion of Democrats are racist, even when they're trying to be benevolent. They have racist views of blacks and other minorities, seeing themselves as the self-appointed saviors of these people. I think that's just as racist as being rather casual or rather indifferent to somebody else. I mean, I think that's worse.
It's one thing to talk about racism in terms of the individuals, David Duke and those persons. You're not going to ever get rid of that, and that is not something that I'm concerned with, because the individuals that are not backed up by the power of the state, what are they going to do? So they're going to be able to function and do what? If the state is in fact carrying out its responsibilities, equal protection of the laws and things of that sort, then they can be racist all day long. They'll have no effect upon anything in society. That's what is being talked about in Larry Elder's book, the first chapter of his book called 10 Things You Cannot Say in America. And he quotes one of the writers, I think it was Orlando Patterson, he was quoting in the first chapter. And Patterson was making this Harvard University professor in sociology, was making the statement that today racism is of such a, is so ostracized in America today that anyone that is exhibiting outright overt racist views, look at the outcry against it. And so the state, as long as the state doesn't back it up, you know, it's not, what people feel and what people's prejudices are and how their beliefs are, and look, they have the right to their beliefs. What we're talking about here is the only time in this country's history where racism has been institutionalized by one of the two political parties. That party was the Democratic Party. And I'm here to tell you that in case you don't know it. And this idea that the party that we have now was formerly the Democratic Party, and they all went into the present party of the present Republican Party, and that's why we're saying the Republicans are racist and so on and so forth, and no one ever makes a claim of the Democratic Party being racist, is because we have this nonsense going on that they all flooded over here.
Okay, I got a question for you, because
you talked about David Duke, by the way, and there's one other person. David Duke, by the way, was never elected as a Republican. He never held elective office. The only politician that went from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party was Strom Thurmond.
I was going to say, no, I'm going to be like the devil's advocate, because just when you're talking about institutionalized racism through the Democrats through passing of laws, I'll agree with you. 99% of that was done by the Democratic Party, especially in the South. But some people point to Ronald Reagan when he was the governor of California. Black Panthers were actually showing up. Members of the Black Panther Party were showing up to public events, carrying weapons. And he was one of the first. They took that. I guess that was the impetus to pass laws against having weapons being presented in, keeping bear arms. Violation of the Second Amendment was done under his watch as governor of California, as a response to that kind of presence. So I could say that, but I can't believe that he was the only one that enacted that. But Democrats, liberals, progressives, whatever, always will point to that, even though it's like kind of putting them in a hard spot because they're actually usually so much against gun ownership and the Second Amendment. They have that's a kind of a no man's land for them to want to venture into. But they claim that that's what they would consider that racist.
Well, I do recognize that historical moment. The Black Panther Party, some of the members of the party went to Sacramento, and they had the right to bear arms. They went into the State House and were brandishing their weapons. And then the government, Ronald Reagan and others, that were asking about and frightened by black men. These were the black men with guns that was written about by Robert Williams in a book called Negroes with Guns. They went in the State House. So the response to it was, we got to pass some prohibition against this kind of arms, and it was a violation of the right to bear arms and so on. But one of the things that you have to look at here is that although the response was to what blacks did, it didn't just apply to blacks. I'm not supporting that either. But what I'm making a distinction here is that as far as specific policies that were designed to hold black people back, the only political party in the country's history that has done that has been the Democratic Party. They have a history all to itself.
I agree with you on that because but like I said, I've argued with people, and the best
institutionalized racism from a political standpoint was the Democratic Party.
See, I learned a lot in college, but 95% of it was at the smoking section. I wasn't a smoker. All my friends were, and all the people I talked to were. And we got some interesting conversations and real lively arguments. I mean, vicious at times. And that was the best preparation ground I've ever had for. Actually, if you basically had to evaluate, you had to put yourself out there, and there was an emotional element to that. And when like about, I was against prohibition of drugs, and I was for prohibition of drugs. And then I argued it out, and then I saw the statistics, and I had to abandon that position because I just and I'm not condoning drug use, but the legal instruments used are ineffective. So I mean, but it took me years and vicious arguments to come to that position, and I just we don't even get to that point now. We nowadays both sides actually I could say more to the left wants to silence any potential for disagreement and a dissent, and that I find that appalling. They'll say, well, community standards. We got to have community standards. So wasn't that what they accused the right of doing back in the '60s, and they had to relinquish that point, allowed them to be discussed because it was a valid point. Now you can't even bring a valid point they brought up back in the '60s back to them and have them feel kind of chagrined by it.
John, you know that book you let me read a couple of months ago. It's been a little bit longer than that, but you let me read the book called Radical Son by David Horowitz. David Horowitz, when he was over on the left, he was able to experience how it was when the conservatives were running things on the college campus. And what he says in that book called Radical Son is that when he was on the left, one of the things he can say about like the classroom is that he could write papers being a radical on the left, and he was not penalized and put down because of what he wrote. But he's noticed that when the campus, which has now been taken over by the liberals, if you in fact have a disagreement with a point of view that is a mainstream point of view from the left, then you are in fact ostracized, jumped on, put down in class, and so on and so forth. He says he had not noticed that when the right was in charge of it. He is talking about the bigotry that he found on that he is now finding on the left. He did not find that when the right was the ones in charge. And so the college campuses right now, if you go on the college campus with another point of view, and let's say that your name is Shapiro, and you go on there and you are this conservative voice, or you are Larry Elder, and you're not at the college down here, what's that college down there, John? The one that is that has the Constitution as part of its
Hillsdale
College. If you go on any college campus and it's not a Hillsdale College type, and you are or Candace Owens, try her on these college campuses, or Mallow. where they were rioting when they went to the college campus to speak. You cannot go on these college campuses with a conservative voice and have the liberals, the students. And I found that when I was at the university. I went to I was teaching class down there, and I decided to go to a telecommunication hookup. It was financed by George Soros, and they're going to have the telecommunication hookup on all the college campuses, and they had it at the university where I was. So I thought I would go there and put my little 2 cents in. And so they showed the speakers. There was a conference, and they were showing the speakers one after the other. The first speaker was Cornel West, and then the second speaker was Pivens. You know, Cloud and Pivens. That group that had conspired to break the capitalist system back in the 1960s by bombarding it with the welfare. They're going to use these black folks to create such a welfare scheme in the country that the capitalist system would collapse based on its own weight, because it would in fact bankrupt the system. That was the intent. And of course the blacks that were being used for that didn't know they were being used for cannon fodder by these leftists. So she was the second speaker. So I sat in there for about, I think it probably went off about an hour and a half, and then they wanted to have some people in the audience to respond to it. And they said, do we have any professors here that would like to respond to what they've heard in the presentation? I raised my hand, and they brought the microphone over there, and I said that I have never heard so much insanity in my life.
Like that clip that I saw played that one time from with Billy Madison. This is the stupidest thing I ever heard, and all that. Do you remember that clip I played? It's like people, everybody here is dumber for having heard it. Not only do I give you a point, but may God have mercy on your soul. Right. Yeah, that's that kind of dumb shit. That kind of dumb stuff. Yeah.
I used to say in my high school class, when a student would say something out of just made no sense, I say like, what was I supposed to learn from that? Or I say I didn't learn anything from that. I'm in this place for an hour and a half, listening to these people up there talking absolute nonsense, trying to slide in their socialist view, because all of them were anti-capitalist. And they can't show me a single example today or in history where socialism has worked anywhere on the planet. And these people, these scholars, these quasi, scholars continue to push this rhetoric that the socialist system is an economic system that trumps the capitalist system. It's just that the ones that have tried to apply socialism have not done an adequate job in its application. So they are the problem, but not the social system itself. So down in Venezuela right now, it would be that Hugo Chavez and his surrogate, the one that's in there right now, Nicolas Maduro, they're the ones that are causing the problem. The socialism is fine. It just has not been applied properly. Or in this country here, Bernie Sanders, he's great. But, and everything is free, by the way. He's going to be able to give you free education. He's going to be able to give you free medical care. Everything is free. The problem is that there's a cost to it.
He's so generous, he'll give somebody else a shirt right off their back to you.
I'm sick and tired of these people making these socialists making me charitable. But the point I was making here is that in that auditorium, I said what I was the only one in that large arena that felt that way. All of the instructors there were over there to the left. I was the only one in there, bringing up the conservative point of view. And what did I want to say what I said for? Because everybody in that auditorium turned around there, Professor Moss, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was coming out against what I said, and students turning around from these political science classes, and they had gotten the gospel from their liberal socialist teachers who they didn't know that behind the scenes I'm writing all the papers and stuff for the in the university and so on and so forth. They didn't know that, but here they in there attacking me. So anyway, there was one lady in the back. She was from the junior college here, my junior college. And as they were doing all this excoriating in my position, I guess she thought I was feeling attacked, because there was nobody there trying to support what I was saying. I didn't care whether they supported it or not, by the way. Okay, we're going to take a break. We need to probably take a break. Give you a chance to rest your ears on WFOV. We'll be back in 4 minutes with you, and we hope you'll have enough time to come back and spend the last 30 minutes with us. Okay, we're going to go ahead with what we're doing here at allpointstv.com. I didn't feel, I mean, there were a lot of attacks being made. I didn't feel under duress because I guess I'm just like Paul Robeson. You know, here I stand. And I'm not asking for any witnesses when I take my position. My positions are very public. And I don't care who doesn't like it. You know, that's just where I am. And if people don't like it, you don't like it. What am I supposed to do about that? Lose sleep over it? I don't care whether people like it or not.
I'm going to play that clip.
I have my position.
I'm going to play that clip that I think this is your reaction to. Okay, hold on, hear that clip.
Said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
John, that's about the way that I feel in a lot of these meetings. I can't believe some of the things that's passing from wisdom from the mountaintop. I mean, it's amazing. But, you know, you stand your ground, and there have been others that had to stand their ground under more dire circumstances. All I was getting was noise. All they were doing was punish me with words. I know people that were strung up for having these views.
I'm thinking about downloading that clip, that audio clip, so we could play that whenever we talk about liberals on campus, okay? I think about using that because I think it encapsulates it perfectly. You know?
It does. But, you know, I'm from that school that we used to have. We would, you know, refer to this school of thought, and that was a school of thought that said that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names would never hurt me. And we seem to think that when a person throwing words out here, that we're supposed to run to the cracks and hide somewhere. And that just makes me stronger. I don't care whether people agree with me or not. I'm not looking for converts. I'm telling you where I stand. And this idea that we got to all be in lockstep with each other, that's a liberal point of view. Now, that's his book right here that I brought to the studio, as a matter of fact, written by Lyle Rossiter. I pretty much carry this book around a lot of times because I need to show them the documented study that's been made here by Dr. Lyle, L-Y-L-E, Lyle H. Rossiter, who is a medical doctor, wrote a book called The Liberal Mind, The Psychological Causes of Political Madness. And this has been studied. And I don't and don't get me wrong about thinking that I'm pushing for the Republican Party, because I'm not pushing for the Republican Party either. I don't think either one of the two parties is worth a quarter. We've been, in fact, in blacks have been done in by both parties. When it behooved them to use black people, they did so, and when it behooved them to cast black folks aside, both parties have done so. And the Republican Party has done it, and also the Democratic Party has done it, and the Democratic Party is doing it now. They don't deserve 93% of black people's vote on the national level from what they've been doing. And I want black people to look at the fact that when Donald Trump, who's supposed to be against black folks according to the narrative, I don't know of any time in the past when the Democrats were against black folks like George Wallace, at the same time black people's condition was improving. Can you point out a time when the real ones that were against black people, the Democrats, when they were against blacks, that they were in fact pulling them to the front of the bus? Okay, I'm glad you're back, WFOV. Thank you for coming back. And we're still ranting about this political nonsense in this country, because we've got to get this thing straight. And because we can't straighten our community out until we get it straight. We got to be clear about the history of this country. And I'm not pushing for the people think that I'm some people see me at these stores and they come up and say, George, you Republican. I'm not a Republican. Where did you get the idea that I'm affiliated with either one of these two parties, two criminal groups? The ones that Del Lorenzo is writing about when he talks about organized crime. These are gangsters. You got two gangs up there in Washington. You got the Democratic Party gang and you got the Republican Party gang. They're both gangsters. And both these gangs are ganging up on Donald Trump. And if black people want to break out of this situation, if America wants to break out of it, they need to do it now. Because if the statists get back in there, and that's who they are, they're talking about you got to be kidding me. They're talking about they're Democrats or Republicans. Do you understand what's going on right now on the national level? We had an election in this country, November the 8th, 2016. The people went to the polls and they voted against these gangsters in Washington. They voted against Hillary Clinton, who's a gangster. And then they asked Bill Clinton yesterday on one of the programs, asked him if he thought the election was legitimate. Of course he doesn't think it's legitimate. His wife lost. The reason why they're taking some umbrage with the election is because they were assured that the people were going to continue to vote for these hoodlums. And they didn't. You got to either understand this election for what it was. The people went to the polls and voted against these hoodlums. That's why they voted for Barack Obama. They were voting against these hoodlums. They thought that Barack Obama would bring something different to the table. And they were willing to give him a chance because we had not had, according to their history, not mine, because I know we've had 5, according to Jade Rogers, 5 Negro presidents, as he called them, or Dr. Bakufu, her book, 6 black presidents. I know we've had some brothers under, United States, brother undercover. We had some brothers undercover and were president of this country. But Barack Obama was one that claimed that he was black. He was no more black than some of the others. In fact, he had less credentials to run as a black person than they did because his mother was the American. His daddy was not American.
If you actually look at the
so he had no right to be running as a black person, given the fact his dad would not have given him the credentials to run as a president.
As much as I dislike having to admit this, if you want to look at the socioeconomic background that Bill Clinton came from, allegedly, I don't know if the narrative's true or not, but he's got more of the average experience that average black person says they would experience. Let's face it, Barack Obama's kind of a jet setter. I mean, basically, I'd like to know how he had all the money to go around all these places, because last I knew, even back in the 70s and 80s, airfare is a couple $1,000 to travel from here to Indonesia or whatever. He had quite a bit of money. It seemed to be well financed. Who provided that? I'd like to know that.
We need to do our homework and our due diligence to find out who was pushing Obama, and there's some names that are back there in the background that was pushing this candidacy forward because there's an agenda that they were running on, and that agenda was one that was overturned in 2016. That's what they're really objecting to. They know there was no Russian collusion in this election to get Donald Trump elected president. All the collusion on the Democratic side. Mueller and these other guys, those 13 to 18 people on his staff, all of them are Democrats, by the way, all of them donors to Hillary Clinton, they're trying to overturn this election in this country. And if the people were awake, and not enough of them are awake, if they were awake, they shut this investigation down. Because what they're trying to do is overturn this election because they disagree with the outcome. But it's not Donald Trump so much that they are coming out against. They're coming, they don't like him now, but they don't like Donald Trump because Donald Trump is a standard bearer that has a direct link to the people. And if the people get in charge of this country, then all of these special interests out here, all these agencies that are feeding on the fattening of the land, they're down the drain. We're talking about the deep state here. But we now have found out what we mean by that. We were talking about the deep state, we talking about the Illuminati, and we were talking about all these groups. We now know what the deep state is. The deep state are all the people that's out here running this system. I'll give you an example of that. Trey Gowdy. Everybody is so surprised that Trey Gowdy, who is the congressional representative of the 4th District in South Carolina, I heard Judge Janine say this on her program this past Saturday. She's so surprised that Trey Gowdy has come out and tried to legitimize the Democratic Party, the intelligence agencies, putting a spy in Donald Trump's campaign, and they're going to claim they were in there spying as a way of looking to see if the Russians were trying to influence anything inside of the they weren't spying on Donald Trump, they said. They were spying on the Russians inside of the Republican Party's campaign for the presidency. Unheard of. And that's Trey Gowdy trying to defend that, saying that given the fact that they were looking at the Russian, trying to interfere with the election, that is certainly nothing that we should be upset about. And Judge Janine was saying she was very surprised that Trey Gowdy took that position, because we now know that the dossier that they use to take to the FISA court to get them to okay this, looking at the Trump campaign, they were making up documents and carrying it to the court, lying before the court. We know that now is all out in the open. Trey Gowdy knows that. Judge Janine was surprised that Trey Gowdy would come out there and defend this investigation of nonsense by the Mueller team, and they're surprised that Trey Gowdy, who's been standing up there as a Tea Party member, and they say, well, they're surprised because he's been blah, blah, blah. Trey Gowdy is part of the deep state also. I'm not surprised by it, because the deep state, when you say the deep state is the members of the House, the members of the Senate. Not all of them, most of them, a great overwhelming majority of them are the deep state. The intelligence community is part of the deep state. The news media in this country is a deep state. Don't look anymore for somebody wielding power above the government of this country. The deep state is the government. It's a government masked. And when you see these jokers, these politicians that have their hand inside of their vests, I saw Harry, and I'm watching everything. I saw Harry, who just was married to the once divorced, maybe twice divorced, some are saying, but I know once divorced, Meghan Markle. He had his hand in his vest. And what does that hand in the vest mean? It is the hidden hand of those that have power in this country. Usually it's the hidden hand of government. The government is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You know, that dual identity, Clark Kent, Superman, Batman, Bruce Wayne, you know, the flip side, even Mud and Jeff, you can say that in terms of these are comedians with power. The Democratic Party is the flip side of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is the flip side of the Democratic Party. Both of them are a bunch of jokers. These are organized gangsters. I'm here to tell you in case you didn't know it. And for anybody to hear what I'm talking about and then put me up there talking about you are this and you are that, hey, you got to understand something here. They're not that themselves. I've said this on numerous occasions on this program. There are no Democrats in the Democratic Party, and there are no Republicans in the Republican Party. You can forget that. They're statists. They're collectivists. And Ayn Rand warned us against them back in the time period when she wrote Atlas Shrugged in 1957. She was talking about these altruists, these people that are parasites. That's who they are, basically. They're parasites. A parasite who has taxing power. I mean, let's talk about some parasites. Ticks, fleas. You ever heard of a tick or a flea asking the dog to pay some taxes so it can grow the influence on his back? That's what they're asking us to do. But what I'm trying to get to here is that I'm not surprised by anything they're doing in Washington. Because I know that we have a criminal class running this country. And it's not somebody above them, it's them. They are hiding out in public. But they've taught people not to see who they are. I see who they are. Let me read something to you that I brought here to the studio. I don't need to read it. I can quote it. But let me tell you where it's located. Maybe I can do it that way. Look in the Declaration of Independence. Look in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. And if you can begin to understand what the framers wrote, and then to see how it is being applied, you can catch them at the gamemanship that I'm talking about. In the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, it says, this is Thomas Jefferson writing in 1776, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Listen to this part here. "That to secure these rights," what rights are we talking about here? The inalienable rights that he just now mentioned, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are inalienable rights. Now, the next part, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. We can say now among women since 1920 with the 19th Amendment, because they now have a voice in the institutionalization of their government. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, hold that just for a minute. And let's go over here to the preamble of the Constitution. And here are the words written by James Madison and some of the other writers who are laying out a new prescription for government under the rule of law. Having failed in writing out something that would work in the Articles of Confederation, they have to come back now and revisit what they tried to do, which limited the federal government from going out of control. But in doing it, they're so weak in it that they now have to come together and try to rectify that problem. And they're now meeting in Philadelphia in 1787. And they draw up a preamble to the Constitution that's going to explain what they're trying to do in writing this new document. And they said these words in the preamble: "We the people," and they had said before that, but they had said "we the states," because it's really the states that are really the ones that are writing this prescription, because they have to delegate some of the power to the federal government, which they are now creating. They're creating this federal government. So they said "we the states," but they changed it to "we the people," because the people are the embodiment of the state. So we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, one more perfect than what was under the Articles of Confederation, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and then this part right here, and this word is capitalized, and secure, consistent with the Declaration of Independence, and secure the blessings, and the word blessings is in fact capitalized, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, the word blessing is capitalized to be consistent with what Thomas Jefferson wrote. Inalienable rights, blessings of liberty. Does government give us anything that is blessing us with anything? No. The blessings are the inalienable rights that we are blessed to have because of our birth. We institute government. Government is instituted among men to secure the rights that we are in fact blessed to have because we are human beings. We are born with these rights. But those rights have to be guaranteed to be protected. We set government up for the protection of the right, not to give us those rights. And then the point, what I want you to understand here is that the brainwashing comes in terms of them talking about these prohibitions against government being a Bill of Rights. Nonsense. Government doesn't give anybody any rights. Government's a threat to our rights. A Bill of Rights. I want somebody to show me, they talk about the first 10 amendments. I hear all these professors on these college campuses, every last one of them, out of their mind. Everyone that's in these law schools right now that's teaching we have a Bill of Rights in this country, every one of them is brainwashed, including Dershowitz, who is an expert on the Constitution. But does he understand there's no Bill of Rights in the Constitution? How are you going to have a Bill of Rights in the Constitution when Thomas Jefferson wrote that we have unalienable rights and that to secure these rights, we have government instituted not to give us rights. Government is instituted to secure the rights that we're born with. There is no Bill of Rights. These are the 10 amendments in the Constitution. I wish some scholar would get in my face with that nonsense. The first 10 amendments in the Constitution is to restrain government from violating our rights. Let me read the first amendment to you. No, I'll read the second amendment. But you have to read part of the first amendment in order to get to the second amendment, so I'll read that part as well. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So each one is Congress shall not. Okay, so then in Amendment 2, listen to this very carefully, because this is one that the government wants to attack, because they understand this is the basis of all the other freedoms. So you always hear them talk about the Second Amendment, and President Donald Trump is saying that he's going to protect your Second Amendment. You better understand that. You better understand what you have in the White House. You have one that's not tied into either one of these criminal classes. They call themselves Democrats and Republicans. You better be glad that you have an outsider in there. Not to the point that he's completely removed from any of the prescriptions of power in Washington, D.C., but at least he's an outsider enough to be able to act upon the behalf of the American people, at least to an extent. Anytime you're inside the government unit, you're part of the government, but at least Donald Trump, as an outsider coming inside, he does have some of the outside status because we put him there. I voted for him, and we vote for him again in 2020, and he's going to win again because Americans are not fooled by this nonsense going on with Mueller. They keep talking about the Second Amendment. This is what they want to take out of here. If they could, they would take it out. A well-regulated militia being necessary. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. You have to have a well-regulated and a well-armed militia, I might add, which is necessary for a free state. And I'll come back and explain why that's true when I read the rest of this. What they're saying here is that because it is necessary to a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Should not be infringed means then that there should be no prohibition passed to restrict the right to bear arms in this country, because the right to bear arms is necessary to maintain people's freedom. That's why you want to have them armed, because the ultimate defenders of their freedom are the American people. And why is that true? Because those freedoms belong to them, not as a prescription from government. They belong to them because they were born with these freedoms, and therefore they have the right to protect them. And this idea of the government giving people rights. You have to give me a break on Monday when the show is being taped. When we get to Saturday, continue to give me a break for those days, the next days also, to the end of the week and then starting next week. That is so ridiculous. But that's the idea that's being put out here, is that these people are benevolent. They're not benevolent. And they're not benevolent in either party. I know why the Democrat, when Donald Trump said, I was watching his speech when he was speaking before the members of the Congress and giving his first State of the Union address, which is ordered in Article 2 of the Constitution. You should give the State of the Union address. You have to give it once a year. Now these jokers want to give it in front of the cameras now because ever since Woodrow Wilson, who began to do it over the airwaves, they found it plays better and it gets more brownie points, gets more political, you get more political points. What's the word I'm looking for here? You get more political mileage. Let's say it that way. You get more political mileage from saying it over the airwaves, and certainly with television, it plays better to be in front of the TV cameras and all the people can watch you and all of that. And you can read off your speech off the teleprompter. Used to be a time when they would do it is that it was just something you had to do. You had to inform Congress. So you wrote it out and sent it to the Congress. Make sure they had a view of the president giving the State of the Union as he sees it from the Oval Office. Now they want to do it through the airways because that's how it plays in the political arena today. But they could do it in writing now. They don't have to do it before the camera, but the chance of them not doing that, you can forget that. That's not going to happen. They're going to go before the camera and get the theatrics involved in it and have people stand up and applaud and all that. One side not clapping, one side over here so enthusiastic and like being in a football game. They're so happy with the part. One side, they show you the scam. One side applauds if it's their party standing bearer. The other side sits on his hands because the party does not represent their party. And that's all a scam also, because there's not an hour difference between the two parties. They just simply have different ways of appealing to different parts of the constituency, so they stand in front of the public a little bit differently. Behind the scenes, they are in sync. And that ain't just a singing group. They are in sync with each other. And if they get through, after they get through in front of the camera, those guys go out and have steak and red wine. Red wine around the nation's capital. They got more red wine being consumed in that area of Virginia, Maryland, you name it, Delaware. Around those states, there's more red wine consumed in that area of the country than any other part of the country. And a lot is being consumed by these alcoholics in Congress. I'm sorry to tell you, they're not what you think that they are. And they know I know it. That's why you got me off Facebook, and I'm glad to be off there. I got more time to read. So they threw me off there because I was saying the truth. Black people's biggest problem in this country is not racism. You can forget that. Black people's biggest problem in this country is blacks' liberalism. The liberal mind, the psychological cause of the political man. I want you to watch how the liberals act on these college campuses when they're intolerant. Look in the black community. Constance Owens is trying to help black people. Kanye West. Last week they talked about the man's mental health. Okay, I'm not saying that all the screws are there or anything. I'm not talking about that Kanye is my favorite, person in terms of some things he's done. But people didn't complain, went up there and grabbed that trophy out of Swift's hands and said it didn't belong to her. It had been awarded to her by the Academy. Kanye West can't go up there and then cancel it single-handedly and say it didn't belong to her because he disagrees. I didn't go along with that, but did anybody come out and say he was mad at that time? No, he was standing, hey, right on.
You know what? It's like the left.
Give me a break.
The communists did that. Whenever somebody disagreed with the communist regime, they were deemed to be psychologically unfit, insane, and they had to be helped. See, it's a veneer of being concerned, and that's the left has consistently used that.
The left is insane. The psychological causes of political madness, the liberal mind. See, people think the liberal mind, they think that this is, I hear them talking about Trump mental deranged syndrome. And that's a mislabeling of it too. It's not Trump mental derangement syndrome. It's a liberal mind. The psychological causes of political madness, the liberal mind, is a liberal mind acting insane as the liberal mind is insane. Insane in this particular regard as it relates to Donald Trump. Kathy Griffin, for example. Kathy Griffin thought that was humorous to walk around with the president's, a replica of the president's head in her hand, dripping with blood, and she couldn't understand why that was wrong. Or this basketball player I was talking about last week, parking diagonally across multiple parking places reserved for handicapped. He's not handicapped, he's a basketball player. The guy, black men can jump, right? So he's not having a problem. And he can't understand why it was that he was being asked about his car being inappropriately parked. The liberal mind is like that. The liberal mind is the problem here. And when I wrote about that, they threw me off of Facebook and so on and so forth. I'm going to continue to talk about it, continue to write about it, and not apologize, because we've got to get this thing straight. And it starts out with understanding the true record of history. And the blacks in this country, we're going to have to go back and get the record straight from the past in order to make a correction in the present for the future. Without that, we're not going to be able to do it. Okay, I got to get out of here. Don't forget to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.